This is the primal scream of a dying regime.
Pray for our enemies, because we're going medieval on these people. You're just not got a free shot on all these networks lying about the people. The people have had a belly full of it. I know you don't like hearing that. I know you try to do everything in the world to stop that, but you're not going to stop it. It's going to happen.
And where do people like that go to share the big lie? MAGA media. I wish in my soul, I wish that any of these people had a conscience.
Ask yourself, what is my task and what is my purpose? If that answer is to save my country, this country will be saved.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Wednesday, 12th of August, Anno Domini 2026. Harnwell here at the helm on Steve Bannon's War Room. That little corner of the week when we dig in to all the developments that's taken place across the Judeo-Christian West. Frank Walker, I hope you had a great week since we did the show last Wednesday.
Yes, sir, I did. Nice to see you.
So we don't have... Nice to see you too. So we don't have Jenny Holland today. She's off skiving here on the Italian peninsula. So we don't have the liberal progressive conscience sitting on our shoulders, whispering into our ear. So it's Walker and Harnwell today, unmediated, right? And you know, so we get to show we get to do the full hardcore show today. And what a great story that we have to start off with. This is a development that exploded this week on social media. I found out about this because I'm not particularly that active on X, on Twitter, but I found out about this particular development because every morning I check Canon 212 to see what's new, what's happened in the United States in Catholicism. And there I saw it there listed in bold, in the headlines, things that I really need to know. And this is a pickup of something that it's a balance sheet, I think, from the United States Catholic Bishops' Conference. And it goes to confirm our worst fears, right? And I remember when Steve Bannon said something along these lines, I think when he was still in the administration, 10 years ago, he basically was he was criticizing Cardinal Dolan in New York, saying basically this guy's just saying these things pro migrants because the Catholic Church, the American Catholic Church, is dependent on taxpayer dollars, hosting the invaders. And of course, Steve, lone voice, prophetic, said that, and everybody in Catholic Inc. sort of rounded on him, calling him anti-Catholic and all the rest of it. They even called him anti-Catholic and all the rest of it. And he was absolutely right. I think the only thing he was wrong on was, even in his worst fears, I don't think he could have realized that the figures were anywhere this bad. So 80%, okay, folks, 80% of the US Catholic Bishops' Conference income comes from a government budget line, basically migrants hosting 80%. And I think, right, you know, we have 4 stories that we're going to talk about this evening because we know we've got to cram in the developments across Christianity into a 1-hour show. 4 stories, 1 hour a week. But we could basically do the whole show, Frank Walker, talking about this single story. And we could do this show every day of the week, Monday to Friday, talking about this story. There is nothing more important for faithful Catholics to realize and to see the evidence, black on white, on the balance sheet here, just how far our so-called pastors, our so-called shepherds, have sold out on this issue, and it has corrupted the entire witness of American Catholicism. Not only in America, we just have the statistics here, the figures here for the American church, but believe me, it's the same across the West. hireling shepherds have sold out to the taxpayer dollar, basically, and submitted themselves to, I won't say to government, but to the globalist powers that secretly govern this world, and have decreed that to rebalance the populations from the global south, the poor global south, to the rich global north. It's a simple case of just shove millions of people north of the equator, and that redistributes poverty somewhat. That's the sum totality of their thinking. That's what they're doing. And the Catholic Church, the so-called Catholic Church that betrays the Catholic faith 24/7, 365 days a year, is pushing on the West an issue which is an existential threat to the Judeo-Christian West, which is the filling of historic Christendom countries with exponents, young 20-year-old exponents of Islam. And that's the reality. So when you see for example, on July the 4th, when you're celebrating, when you Americans are celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and you're told repeatedly, because the mainstream media, which doesn't exist to report the truth, but exists to condition you according to the ideas that benefit those powers that secretly run the world. They tell you constantly, you have now the first American Pope. When that first American Pope goes to Lampedusa on July the 4th and hits Catholics, practicing Catholics, hard over the head that they have to accept ever more invaders because it's the Christian thing to do, because invaders are made in the image and likeness of God. Don't forget that the bottom line here, the American church, probably the most important faction of Catholicism in the world, not in terms of believers, not in terms of financial power, or not solely in those terms, but in terms of this is the American church, America being the most military powerful, culturally powerful, financially powerful nation ever to existed. When the Pope comes out and says on July the 4th that you have to accept any invaders that choose to come and live your countries because human dignity, the American church, which is extremely important in the Vatican and the worldwide church, and your first American Pope are de facto dependent on the whole charade, Frank Walker, the whole charade continuing, right? This is why on this show, week after week, Wednesday after Wednesday, we say that these people are not owed, the bishops, the cardinals, they are not owed obedience because they are usurpers. The Catholic Church, the Vatican, is a global human trafficking organization financed by taxpayer dollars under the outer aspect of being a religious organization, and that's why they get away with it so much. Frank Walker, you had this story upon Canon 212. Tell us then the details. What exactly had broke then this week? Because as I say, it has been ricocheting across social media and Twitter particularly.
Well, their 2024 budget has been released, and you can see that they've gotten 80% up all the money that they spend at the USCCB, the Conference of Catholic Bishops, from the government for migration purposes, part of a $1 billion grant. And they're not the only a church that accepts this money. All churches accept this, and also Jewish people accept, Jewish churches accept it. And it really shows you how we're all one and we all work for the same boss. Francis took away the idea of being a vicar of Christ formally as his job description. And they're not really, the popes are no longer vicars of Christ. Who are they the vicar of? They're the vicar of the world. They're at this site Effort News that's relating this information. They call them migrant contractors with a minor stake in the churches. And really that is no longer their business model. I mean, for thousands of years, they didn't get tax dollars. You see, they fight for tax dollars and they say, if you don't give us these tax dollars, it's not religious freedom. It's against us religiously, but we don't. That dirty money corrupts. That means that's who you worked for. The migrant spending has increased 10 times since Obama became president. And now it shows it's 36% of all their expenses. It covers refugee admissions, entry assistance, unaccompanied minors, and Afghan resettlement in 2024 before Trump came back. But I mean, unaccompanied minors, that's a whole nother issue. Well, all the minors that have been lost. But that money going to the SCCB, those hundreds of millions, that's only a small part. That their budget, USCCB didn't exist before Paul VI made conferences all over the place. They don't have any real authority. It was the bishop and the pope, and that was it. But now they're there. That money is just to cost us less than one Catholic hospital. Think of all the hospitals and colleges and all the dirty money that you're not seeing in this report. All over the world, like you mentioned, Ben, it's all over the world. There's Catholic Charities is a local operation mainly, and Catholic Relief Services that actually bring in the migrants and pay for them and settle them and lose all the children. Those are separate operations that have their own budgets. That they're related. They have they're intermixed, but legally. So what does the USCCB do with a lot of their money? I wonder how much of it is actually lobbying, because as this article says, they have all sorts of campaigns against Trump all the time, constantly, no matter what. And you can see all the different articles that they list in this piece here.
I was going to ask you to say just a bit to recap why we have been calling out trad Inc. so much on this show over the years, since we've been doing this show since Leo stepped out onto the balcony, and to draw attention to the grubby reality here. We've lifted up the slab, as it were, and we see all the creepy crawlies now sort of down in the dark, hidden. And I was going to ask you to take a victory lap around that point. I won't. Because you just said something in your closing words, which is, for anybody who's been involved with working in government and how NGOs are financed, you've just actually really said one of the most profound things about how the corruption works, and that is government gives taxpayers money to these NGOs, which are normally called under the category of civil society, and this is definitely one of those that would certainly come into that general budget line, right? Government gives money to NGOs masked as civil society expenditure, and that civil society, and this includes, I repeat, the institutional Catholic Church, then use taxpayers' money to lobby the government according to the diktat of the government, through which they will then get more. But it's basically government, it would look too corrupt if government spent these sums of money in lobbying and shaping public opinion. It does do that, right? It definitely spends public money to condition public opinion. But right. what government does is that it funnels that money via the NGOs to make it look as if this independent lobbying, independent sort of consultation, when really it's just government paying outside organizations that take their cut to lobby themselves, to lobby the government itself. And that's exactly what the institutional Catholic Church here is complicit in doing. Frank Walker.
Yeah, so it's like in China, you have a state machine that they're calling a church, and they want us to follow it and obey it. I mean, the things that they do with this money, they fought for birthright citizenship, and they sued, and they won in the Supreme Court. They made a big video of the bishops, and Pope Leo out of Castle Gandolfo said that Trump was not pro-life. And they had the Miami bishop was just in Washington lobbying for 350,000 Haitian extension to their be able to stay in the country. They have pilgrimages right up to the ICE doors, and they hold the monstrance right up to the door. They complain that they're inhuman treatment at Alligator Alcatraz. They pass Holy Communion through the slats of the border fence, and they're fighting an eminent domain suit down in New Mexico so that they can't build the border wall through this park, and they're flooding the episcopate with Latin American liberation theology, people that are not really, related to the American people, and they have a whole new level of attack that they know that they've brought up and down there. This is all the reality of this government church that you're describing. And so, yes, to Trad Inc., we have to say, if you consider these things to be, holy, and we must have this respectful obligation that we would have normally towards the church and the hierarchy, I would consider how it is funded and who these people work for in comparison to Christ himself. And it's a global problem, like you said, Ben, and when you look at Kuwait, the way they handle that in Spain, even in Tokyo, where they don't have an illegal alien problem, that the Cardinal of Tokyo, Kikuchi, is lobbying for more illegal aliens. They want to destroy even Japan. And the Cardinal at the same time, following the diktats of the government, is pushing LGBT rights instruction training in a country where that is so foreign, where they haven't been, morally as infiltrated as they have everywhere else. What does that have to do with illegal aliens? Well, it's just, that's the head of Caritas. That's the big umbrella group that gets all that illegal alien money all around the world. And here he is pushing LGBTQ and training in a place like Tokyo. It's just the corrupt church is enormous, and we are all its victims. And when you look at how the money falls out, it's incontrovertible.
It's disgusting. It's disgusting, Frank Walker, that they're doing this. They're doing this in the name of God. When it comes to the faith and it comes to salvation, what actually makes me angry, because, I've been working in politics now for 30 years. I'm pretty cynical about things that I see in public life, right? Churchmen are basically politicians anyway, unelected politicians anyway. You've got to be in order to get to the top. That's how the Catholic Church works. That institution that calls itself the Catholic Church works. Now, it wasn't always like that, but it is now.
Right.
But I could, if it were just a case of the grift and the sponsoring of the invasion, that wouldn't that wouldn't get me here. What gets me here is the fact that above the grift, above the corruption, these people that call themselves bishops and cardinals and expect the laity to bow down and scrape whenever they walk by, right? There are few believing Catholics in the world today. People who actually hold the unchanging Catholic faith. Very few. What these people do that really makes me angry, right? Because they could just stick in their marble palaces with all their artwork and all the rest of it and all the grift, and that would just be one category of selling out. But the thing that's really satanic is if sponsoring the invasion and the dissolution of the Judeo-Christian West wasn't satanic. But what's really satanic, Frank Walker, is that they go beyond that, and those few believing Catholics that there are, they go by these people, these bishops, these cardinals, these so-called popes, and they kick the back of these Catholics. They kick in the back of the knees, right? They make believing so much more difficult. That's right. What I find just unpalatable. I could, as I say, I've been in politics. I've seen the grift. I could forget the grift, right? I could just ignore the grift. But they have to go and make the difficult job of believing in an unbelieving world more difficult for those things that pertain to the faith. We've got to move on.
But Ben,
go on.
Hispanics have dropped like crazy. It's not like they're becoming Catholic. They're all leaving the church. They come into this country. I wanted to add that on there.
We hit. You're right. And this is why it all ties together, right? These things that we're talking today emerged in the news in the last 48 hours. What you're talking about there, we hit that low before we knew before we had the statistical evidence. We hit that exact point on last Wednesday's show. There is a continuity week in, week out why we do this show, because even when we don't know what we're going to be talking about next Wednesday either. We're going to see what news they furnish us between now and then, but you can guarantee that it will fit this narrative if you know how to see it. And this is something that we've called out constantly. I will say this before we move on, but these themes, I'm sure they're going to be woven in, right, to the rest of the stories, because it's all the same thing. It's the same thing we're talking about from four different angles, right? I'll close with this. What we can do about this as believing Catholics or believing evangelicals, conservative evangelicals, right? Don't give to your hireling shepherds a sense of obedience where it is not appropriate. And in the Catholic Church, I'd say it's not appropriate basically anywhere. We Catholics, we believing Catholics, need to take the running of the church back. We need to take the reins of the church out of the hands of these corrupt hireling shepherds who are driving the church maliciously, satanically into the ground, as they have been doing for the last 65 years, right? Take the running of the reins of the church out of their hands and correct the trajectory. Now, there's a legitimate question as to what the proper role is in the laity, in traditionally understood in the Catholic Church, and it might not be running the church, but there is necessary for a course correction. We need to storm the cockpit, basically, course correct, clear out all the hireling shepherds, right?
And don't respect them.
Related, we need don't respect them. Don't give them. These are the people who are 81.8% are funded, right, by taxpayer dollars in order to promote the invasion. Don't give these people your obedience, right? And I take this moment to call out Tradink, who for the last 14 months or whatever it's been, 15 months, have been saying, don't criticize the Pope publicly because it's unseemly and un-Catholic. We as Catholics owe the papacy our docile obedience, right? This is what they say. Give Leo time, right? Give him patience, and don't forget to donate. This has been their shtick for 15 months.
Right. That's helping scandal. We have an obligation to correct scandal. And the biggest scandal that you could ever imagine is having a pope and bishops who are contemptible, and we treat them with respect. Everybody's misled by that, and that's a sin on our part.
Isn't that Canon 212? Isn't that what Canon 212 is about, the obligation of the laity on that point?
Right, undoing the scandal of this false church. The whole point of a church is to lead you to God, to lead you to heaven. And when they're leading you the opposite way in obedience to the world, well, then somebody has to, as Catholics, our job is to step in and correct that problem. And it's not just going to be directly with the church, it's going to be in every aspect of life. People are taught to be respectful for contemptible things. And just that in and of itself, not even with obedience, is always such a huge mistake. I had to go look to a Novus Ordo, and they were giving a lesson to the kids today. They taught them politeness and obedience and respect of authority and all these sheepish qualities. And really, there's so much more than that. You have to have agency, and we need agency. Just as the human race needs agency, we're being walked all over. And it's the same in this government church that Catholics are being, like you said, kicked by these bishops. One bishop that's not one. Even the best bishops are bad on these paid for issues.
it's just not to do something in this situation with the world in crisis as it is, with the Catholic Church in crisis as it is to mask cowardice and weakness and apathy under the outer veneer of piety and obedience. And I don't think either of us, Frank Walker, have any time for it. Look, we haven't done the ad read. I'm going to do it now because I think that the first half of the show, what Frank Walker was saying has been so engaging. Quick shout out now to Birch Gold Group. Folks, you might remember I have said this. The week before last, the Vatican announced that even though its operating surpluses fell by more than 60% in 2025, its overall finances rose thanks to gains in gold, real estate and investments. So if the Vatican, that's been around for a good few years, 2,000 of them, and the Vatican that likes to say it thinks in centuries, if the Vatican realizes that gold is where you need to be because we are in times of turbulence, and if the Vatican is buying gold, then that is the signal, I think, to retail investors everywhere to be considering doing the same. And who better to go to? Because you might not know, one might not know, I don't know how to get an IRA in physical gold sorted. I wouldn't know how to do that. So that's why there are experts there offering this service. And Philip Patrick and his team at Birch Gold that's what they're there in the business to do. They're there to give advice and counsel, and they'll give you advice as well. They'll tell you what to do. They'll tell you exactly how to be investing in a physical IRA in gold. Text Bannon, BANNON, to 989898, and they'll tell you what the deal is. And I'd tell you this, it's probably going to be a lot simpler than you might be thinking. Once again, text Bannon, BANNON, to 989898. Back with Frank Walker in 2 minutes after this short commercial break.
Hello, America's Voice family.
Are you on Getter yet? No?
What are you waiting for?
It's free.
It's uncensored, and it's where all the biggest voices in conservative media are speaking out.
Download the Getter app right now. It's totally free. It's where I put up exclusively all of my content 24 hours a day. You want to know what Steve Bannon's thinking? Go to Getter.
That's right. You can follow all of your favorites. Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk, Jack Posobiec,
And so many more.
Download the Getter app now.
Sign up for free and be part of the movement.
Welcome back. Okay, Frank Walker, we've got to gallop through these remaining three stories now. Let's go to this Religion News Service story suggesting that people standing for election and getting involved in elections, describing themselves as pastors, aren't real pastors. I'd say, look, and this ties into some of what we're saying already, and it will tie into what we're going to say as we cover the rest of the material. The consequence, folks, that Christianity is so powerful in the United States at this moment in time, and it is so engaged in the public square, is that it's like a moth on a porch in the middle of summer to the grifters. And this would be the case whatever the situation was. We're dealing with Christianity at the moment. Christianity is it's having a moment, as it were. I think it's even more the role of Christianity is even more engaged right now than, say, it was in the 80s when Ronald Reagan was president. That would be my thesis. But the consequence of that is that because it is important, and because voters are increasingly voting, Christian voters are increasingly voting on Christian issues, and that proportion of the electorate is growing. It's attracting the grifters. And I think, Frank Walker, this story illustrates that to some degree. What was your take here?
Yeah, I agree with you that that they're trying to capitalize on it, and this is just, it's sort of like growing like a virus. This was something that you saw in Latin America and you saw in the Black community. With people who are are religious leaders that are moving into politics, but it wasn't so much in the mainline Protestants. And Catholics don't belong directly to politics, but they all meddle in it. There's in Iowa, there's a couple of people that are running, and they've had success. And then in Texas, and that's what this article discusses them. And they're like studying to be seminarians, Protestant seminarians. And you probably heard of James Tallarico in Texas, but my point is that they're not really addressing it correctly. The Republicans are looking at them and they're saying, well, they're blasphemous in their policies, and it's true, but they're fighting from the negative. They're saying Tallarico is blasphemous. They're saying that this one woman is a witch, which is something they tried a year ago. They take a Protestant and they call her a witch. Because they really have evil leftist policies, just like the Pope, no different than that, except for they're open politicians. But I think the best way to address it, negativity is important, but you need to come back with a positive. I'm a Christian. I'm a pro-Christian person, and here's how we apply this. I think of an example, somebody like Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth is always very openly Christian about his justifications for why he does things. And you can't really knock it because it's true. So, and Ken Paxton is in Texas, and Dan Patrick's are calling them blasphemous. I think it's also good to come back and be positive and take. We could have people who are pastors that are actually Catholic, or actually Christian, actually Bible believing, and then show how that policy works, and that will address what you said there, Ben, about this new Christian, that's the only way really to come at this.
I'm
trying to go
by I'm intrigued by what you said about Pete Hegseth there, because I had the same intuition about the guy, but I like the way how you framed it, where you said, basically, if you want to be negative, but come back with a positive, and then you say that Pete Hegseth is I don't want to put words into your mouth. You didn't quite say role model, but I guess he is in a way. I think he is as to how to be a Christian in public life, because I actually think he does very, very well at showing how his faith is. In a non-preachy way, he does very well, I think, showing how his faith is the positive, a very sincere way of showing how his faith gives him the impetus of what he's trying to do in public service.
And Trump is like that too. More than in previous presidents, he's like that in many ways too. It's just that we have so many evangelicals and Protestants that support things like gay marriage and the trans movement, and Catholics too, that we need to have a clear voice. We have to enunciate what our message is and how it goes back to biblical values and to traditional Christian and Catholic values. And that, I think that's the best way to respond to this, because this kind of thing can be successful. But in the end, I don't think it works out. Does anybody remember that Jesse Jackson was a reverend? It didn't work out, because when they got into politics and you got to know them better enough, you could see they had nothing to do with the Christian faith. It was just a label designed to reel in voters. But that's what I think about this new movement. But they say it's successful. In this RNS piece, they say the Republicans that are trying to come from a clearly a faithful perspective as reverends, as official pastors, as being trained in these, they haven't had as much success, but they kind of have had, about the same success. It's just this article is leaning to the left. So I think it can be done. And I think we have a duty to.
Isn't Al Sharpton a reverend?
Yeah, that's right. Al Sharpton's a reverend. They're bringing back that tradition.
Right. I get your point about Jesse Jackson as well. All right. Look, quickly then, moving on to that really basically it's another subject for another day, but you really only get this in the United States. These reverends in politics, in public life. We don't get that in the UK. All right, okay. Let's move on to Germany now. There's a confirmation here of something that we've said. Jenny often points it out on the show in terms of the increases, the slight incremental increases in adult baptisms, perhaps down on infant on baptisms of babies, the cultural Catholics. This is a general indication. I don't see a specific Generation Z dynamic in this, in what we're going to talk about now, the latest figures, but it's certainly consonant with what we're saying. So you're getting an increase, a year-by-year increase in adult. I'd like to know what the age categories are of this. Actually, you're getting a year-by-year increase in Catholic baptisms of adults. In Germany, across in America, in France, in Austria, this article indicates, so on and so forth, and a decrease an increase in adults who are leaving the church in Germany, huge catastrophic numbers, and decreases in infant baptisms. That is, I think, confirmation of the general thing that we talk about here on the show, of the dynamics of what's going on. The cultural Catholicism the tide is going out on that, because after 2 or 3 generations post-council, it's just not worth it anymore. The post-conciliar faith isn't worth passing on. What you do get, though, what you are getting are adults coming forward. They see the valuelessness of contemporary secular life, and they're responding to the Christian call. Frank Walker.
Right, because the faith is like little sprouts, little shoots out of the cracks in the sidewalk. No matter how much the world tries to crush it, they can't really kill it. Like they couldn't kill Jesus for more than a couple of days, So it's going to keep coming out. But then they turn to the Catholic Church, and what do they get? They have the 28% increase in adult baptisms. That sounds like huge. Great news, but it's really only 700 people in Germany. I think there's 84 million people in Germany, and or I don't know if that many Catholics. I forget what the statistic is, but the actual, like you mentioned, the number of people that are, and you have to fill out a form. You have to go to an office to quit the German church because you don't make donations there. They take them from you in your taxes. And if you're making 100,000 euros, it amounts to like 100 euros a month. In your family, that's what they take from you. You don't give it. So if you have to go through all the trouble to go in there and sign up for that, still 500,000 people are leaving there's 20 million Catholics in Germany, and 500,000 are leaving every year. And so it's not going to be long and the babies are 7,000 less every year. So that's the reality. The fact that new people are coming to the church, I hope that they find the traditional movements, because the traditional movements will have a completely different effect on them than they will go into this German church. But I do notice that in Leo's story at Leo's church right now, the head of the Council for the Economy has been held over, Cardinal Marx, from Germany, from way back in like 2014. He's still there now. And that must be a very important council, because there are people, from boards and insurance, European insurance companies, European finance and banking, all sorts of very powerful people are on the board of the Vatican Bank. And he's the one in charge. And now they have this synodal movement that they've, been just blown over the top, even past Leo's heresies. But they appointed somebody from the head of that movement to be like the co-chair of the Vatican Bank from Germany too. So where they get all of those billions into that church, that really has an effect on France, on Leo's church.
So let's do some number crunching then, Frank Walker. 2,650 is the number of adults and young adults baptized in Germany in 2025. That's a 28% increase from the previous year. My take on that is not so much that people are flocking towards Leo. It's the fact that Bergoglio was so bad and so off-putting. It's somewhat of a dead cat bounce. In terms of infant baptisms, they're coming down. 109,002 christenings, basically, of kids in 2025. That's down from 116,274 in the year before. 300,000 adults formally left the church in Germany, according to the procedure that Frank Walker was just talking about. Though good news, that is down from 321,000 the year before. Just like back in, it's sort of decreasing. The stampede for the door is decreasing year on year. In 2022, it was over 500,000. In terms of the actual cash, because that's what it's all about, the German Bishops' Conference said that the Catholic Church in Germany received 6.75 billion euros. That's about $7.7 billion via the official church tax system.
Right.
If I were German Catholic, I would go through I think they excommunicate you, don't they? They say you can't receive the sacraments if you do that. Obviously, because it's all about the money, right? There's no pretense. It's all about the money. They won't give you the sacraments out of spite if you say you don't want your portion of your taxes, your income taxes, which is already high in Germany, going towards the institutional Catholic Church. I would do that. I would actually say, you know what? I'll take my look with the SSPX. I'll take my look with the Lefebvre's. You're not taking a single dollar or euro of my tax income. Because you're modernist heretics.
They don't get government money either. They don't get government money in the trad world. They also have half as many priests that they ordained. 25 and 50 years on 10 years ago was 50. I mean, the Catholic Church is a priestly religion. Priests are essential and necessary. So people are trying to find the faith, but all around them is this collapse.
People are trying, Frank Walker, people are trying to, yes, they are searching the faith, but I tell you where they're not going to find faith. It's in the very people that drove the folks out of the church over the last 65 years, right? The priests, bishops and cardinals have had a concerted effort to empty the churches over the last 65 years because they don't want anyone in who actually holds the traditional Catholic faith. So if you're waking up to to just how valueless the modern system is, you're not going to. Why go to the very people who've driven the Catholic Church, the institutional Catholic Church, into the ground? You need to go elsewhere. You need to go into the traditional movements that are only tenuously or explicitly not in communion with Rome at all, because that's where they go.
There's 10 times as many babies that aren't being baptized as there are new Catholics that are adults. Compare that to the new mosque in the city that's going with it in Texas right now. They in Islam, they grow like crazy. And Islam, their politicians are already like official religious figures, because everybody is a religious figure in Islam. You wear it on your sleeve.
Only the difference is these people, the religious versions of the Jesse Jacksons and the Al Sharps in Islam, right? They actually do believe the substance of their faith. That's the difference, right? To say nothing of the Catholic Church's version of Highling Shepherds. All right, folks, quick shout out to our sponsor of the second half of the show, America's Health Share. Go to freedomforhealth.org/Bannon. That's Freedom for Health. Freedom for Health, all one word, freedomforhealth.org/Bannon, and discover why tens of thousands of American patriots are joining America's Health Share. Now, America's Health Share reduces your healthcare costs by an average of 60%, and it is accepted everywhere. So, in other words, you can say goodbye to, in quotes, out-of-network limitations. For as low as $68 per month, an individual can get great health coverage, minus all of those complications and price gouging from the healthcare providers. Once again, go to freedomforhealth.org/Bannon to find out how you can avail yourself of that $68 per month health care coverage. And I think they even give you the first month absolutely free if you use promo code Bannon, BANNON, freedomforhealth.org/Bannon. All right, Frank Walker, time running out. I've got about just a couple of minutes left now. Let's quickly talk about this rather bizarre clarification that the Vatican made going back to the year 2000, when Pope John Paul II had apparently said, "God bless Islam," in a prayer for, I think, Jordan. That was what was carried on the official Vatican website. The clarification was made secretly. No statement was made, so we don't quite know when it was made. But apparently it was a dodgy audio coupled with John Paul II's Polish accented English. He was actually saying "God bless this land" rather than God, as in Jordan, rather than God bless Islam. The reason we're mentioning this now, Frank Walker, is that Trad Inc., our old friends at Trad Inc., are cock-a-hoop about this clarification, because they're saying, oh, look, just how orthodox JP2 really was. He never said "God bless Islam." He said "God bless this land." Frank Walker, as you are talking about Trad Inc.'s response to this, we're just going to gently put up a photo from the year before, the year 1999. May the 14th, the day after Our Lady of Fatima, May the 14th, 1999, when John Paul II was kissing a Quran. I think he's having a good snog with that Quran. So that photo's going to go up of JP2 kissing the Quran, as you tell us Trad Inc.'s reaction to just how orthodox JP2 really was with regards to Islam. Take it away, Frank Walker.
Yes, the Trad Inc. likes to make sure that everybody knows that JP2 is good, that every pope must be obeyed and followed and considered to be, in many cases today, especially in Leo's case, godlike. Leo has a sidekick, a little Edgar that he's known since he was 15 years old. He was in Peru yesterday, and he said, "I'm like John the Baptist," and Leo's like Jesus. So they make too much out of these popes, but I think it's clear from the video audio, like you just mentioned, that he was saying "bless this land," but he did kiss the Quran. I don't think that was a mistake or a misrepresentation. And they have a lot of things to knock against him. What this teaches, this event, is that, like Benedict said, my authority ends at that door of the office. I don't feel like I have any power over anything in this church, because there are so many wolves in the Vatican that, my life is at stake. And then he ended up running away anyway. So it wasn't any different when JP2 was there. Those guys were there at the permission of whatever the powers that be were. Paul VI and John 23rd, yeah, it might be okay. Leo and Francis, completely different. When Leo and Francis, when they put the wrong thing in the Vatican news somewhere, it's because Leo and Francis wanted that way. But in JP2's
Talking about Vatican News, 10 seconds, Frank Walker, where do people go to stay abreast, like I did this week, about everything important that's worth knowing taking place? What website do they go to?
NN212 at one N. Take a look at, you can see the daily update on the right column is a video update about 10-15 minutes at Gloria TV and at Rumble. That's where you
Frank
can
Walker,
find it.
God bless you. See you next week. Thanks to Rob at Real America's Voice this week.